Hello and welcome back to another destruction video. I'm covering the destructible walls again. If you want to see part one of this series, there is the first part kind of going through the beginnings of the destructible wall. Definitely recommend checking that out. I'll put a link to it down in the description. Here's what we got so far though. I have finally figured out sub UVs. I know I talked about it in the last video. I talked about how I would have loved to make it so we have separated tiles to allow us to have different kinds of bullet holes and overall shapes. And I figured it out. I'm gonna be honest. The method that I did to get it working was extremely hacky, and to be honest, I could probably clean up a lot of the math. I'm at this point where I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not gonna work on this for a little while now. I did want to add a detail where you could break open the entire wall, but I think I'm gonna keep that on pause for a little bit until maybe like the future. We do have one level which is basically gonna be this abandoned drug condo, basically taken over by like drug empire or whatever. I'm probably gonna add destructible walls all over the place over there, and I would like to make it so you can actually run through those walls, because that's kind of what I want to do there. For now, I want to show you what I did. One thing I did to kind of I guess make it obvious that you can't break it is I changed all of the studs in this level to be metal, which I think kind of maybe like reads better from a language standpoint of, oh, you can't break the studs, it's just the drywall that you can break. All of the destructible walls are using metal studs, and there's a lot of cool little spots here, which I'm really excited for players to be able to play around with and have fun with. Somebody had the concern that this might have some balancing issues and it might make the player OP. I want to note that I haven't gotten through it just yet. In fact, this is running off of the glass system, so I actually have not changed the collision of it yet, which means that it's actually see-through technically to AI. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so once you shoot a bullet hole through it and then potentially even make a big hole, the wall will essentially be considered as see-through to the AI, and then they'll just start shooting at you and stuff like that. So that's most likely what I'll do here. I might even do something custom where if somebody died because they were shot through a wall, maybe I'll make it so all enemies around will immediately just take cover. They'll try to maybe take cover behind things that aren't the wall. Obviously, if we set this to invisible to the AI, that'll basically mean that they're not going to take cover behind this. They'll take cover behind anything else that's static. So that's kind of what I have planned for that. Yes, it does make it so the player can essentially just shoot shit through a wall, but that's the whole point of the walls, is to kind of give players this possibility of doing some cool things, of like shooting through the walls and killing enemies through it. But of course, there is going to be the price to pay that enemies will shoot back at you, and maybe, like I said, with the whole thing of them taking cover, that's what they'll try to do and whatnot. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Crimson, what do you mean by sub UV? What do you mean by tiles? Well, I now made it so instead of all of the gunshots when you're shooting through the wall are all one singular thing, as you can tell by the avocado right here that we had before. This was our original brush. That was the only one being used, and I felt like that was kind of, you know, I felt like we could have done a little bit more. With glass, it's okay because it's a glass shattering. You see the shards and shit like that, but for this I feel like it's a little different. It's drywall. I do have to change some of the scales and stuff, and I'll probably show that to you throughout this video. Like, you'll see that it's a little large, so I think if anything we could probably adjust the green mask of this first one here, but we'll take a look at it later on. But essentially, in our material system, we can now choose between 4 of these tiles, and that's the same thing for the other large mask as well. So these are the large pieces. When you blow out pieces next to the little holes, they're essentially going to randomize which frame to utilize when we are shooting the walls. And I'll just show you that code real quick. It's very, very simple, honestly. So in here, we basically create a dynamic material instance called wall break brush. The thing is, I'm creating this dynamic material instance every single time we hit the wall. I probably don't need to do that, to be honest. I probably just need to make it once, and then I'll just set the variable, and then I can set the parameters inside of it. But as I kind of mentioned in the first part, we use the UV transform to essentially set where the brush is going to be placed. But what we also have is the frame. So we essentially randomize from 0 to 3 because we have 4 tiles. So we randomize from 0 to 3. 0 would be the top left, essentially, and then 3 would be the bottom right. And then from there, that frame is going to be sent to our material. In this break brush material, which is essentially the brush that gets painted to the render target, I've changed it a lot. This was our original method, commented with old method. You could see the UV transform in there with texture coordinates, all that kind of fun stuff, UV scale, UV rotation, and then the brush texture. What I did is I looked into the sub UV function code, and I essentially copy pasted it to try to use it for our own use case scenario here. And you can see frame is used right here. But I had to change up a lot of things because our method edits the UVs right here based on our old method. And that obviously caused issues with sub UV. That's what I meant by at the beginning of the video. I could have easily optimized a lot of the math here. But what I did as a precaution to try to get this working properly is I essentially use a grayscale mask with different grayscale values. And I have an if statement here that will basically just pick from these colors. So I think we have like 0, 33%, 66%, and then 1 or 100%. Or I don't know what the actual like, values are for colors or whatever. I ain't that big of a nerd, okay? Although that's probably not true. But yeah, as you can tell, you can kind of get an idea of how this works. We have frame 0, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3 again, right? So I have a sub UV mask that will basically, as a precaution, we will multiply the mask, because previously what would end up happening is we'd have our top right section with all 4 for some reason. If I set the frame to 3, you can see that it moves in the corner. But unfortunately, this ended up having issues and we'd end up seeing all of them, which is not good. So what I ended up doing is I multiply it with our frame kind of system here, and you can see now there's just that one. So if I change the frame to 1, we have that, the other one, frame 2, we have the next one, and then frame 3, which I think is like the gradient one. Yeah. So that's basically how it works, to give you a little bit of a like gist of what I adjusted in terms of the sub UV. Something I also did is in our destructible wall system, our way of making it so you don't have the ability to shoot in the same spot again is I keep track of the hit locations. What I was doing before is I would only keep track of the hit locations, and then there'd be a radius, a fixed radius for all of them. So I'll show you how that works here. So we essentially go through the hit locations and we check if there's a distance between the new shot and one of our hit locations, and it checks it in a radius. So before it used to be just a fixed value of 0.04. Now what we're doing is we are making it so the small holes are 0.03, whereas if we end up finding out that the hit location is kind of super close to a hole, but not exactly close to a hole, so 0.1 rather than like 0.03 or 0.04, this will instead make a large brush, that this big one right here. And then it changes the scales and does a bunch of new things. And I'll show off some of the new particles that we also added in. I'm going to be honest, I didn't make a lot of these particles. I'm just editing a bunch of particles that I already have in like the ballistics VFX packs and some of the grenade packs. This drywall shatter, which is like a bunch of the wood pieces, are actually from a grenade explosion. And I'm just editing that and picking and choosing the specific things that I want from it to kind of get the effect that I want, and then scaling it down and stuff. So I didn't really make the effects. I'm not going to take any credit for that. That's just me using what I have to my disposal. But then in here, what I basically do is I will get the UV scale, divide it and stuff. So I'm not really saving a variable here. What I'm doing instead is I'm taking the UV scale because we do scale it up, and I want this to be kind of like, I guess, make it a little bit more adaptable. So if something's really big, like we'll try to match our hit radius to that, and then I'll set the array element of the last one because we do create it beforehand. We'll just readjust the value and then add a little bit to it. So we're kind of doing an accurate kind of hit location radius type system. I was looking into potentially using like a physical material mask or something of the sort where it would actually read the pixel data, but that's super expensive apparently, and it takes super long and it's not performant. So I think in terms of our top-down game and just getting this to work, I think this is our best plan of action, to be honest. So I mentioned that we have new effects. The wall breaking looks fantastic. I think we could probably do a little bit more with it, but it looks really, really nice with these new effects. So if I break this open, you can see wood pieces coming out of it and stuff. I do want to adjust some of the scales here of the bullet holes because I feel like they're a little too comical, so I'll probably do that later on. But this looks great. Like, it breaks apart on the other side as well. There's this one wall, so if there's a guard passing by, you can just shoot him in the face or something like that. And you can really tell what the destruction looks like on the other side, which is pretty fun. There's a couple little caveats that I would want to fix, and one of the people commented that it would be nice to have it so both the walls are separate and kind of have their own holes. Now, I did think about that. One of the things I noticed, or one of the things I thought about when I was working on this, is these render targets are already 1024 resolution. So this entire wall and the other side of the wall use the same UVs. So they're just one big UV section, 1-to-1, 1024 by 1024. Now, the problem is if I separate the walls to be into their own, like, things, right? So if I shoot through the wall and I'm at like a diagonal and it hits the other side and it makes a different hole on both sides at different locations, there's a big problem with doing that. One, we have to separate the UVs into two different, I guess, UV tiles. I don't know what the actual proper terminology for that is. And if we do that, we now have a 1024 texture that is only using 512 by 512. If you only use 512 by 512, you lose half of your texture and it's wasted. Unless we do 1024 by 512, which then, wouldn't be too bad, but still we are now going from a 1024 texture to a 512 by 512. So we're losing half of that pixel information that we originally had over here, which sucks. That's not great. And then we end up having to, sacrifice some quality stuff. To be fair, I did test out 512 by 512 with this wall, and it wasn't bad. But I think I would rather just set it, the entire thing, to 512 by 512 rather than use 1024 and have it separated into two tiles. I don't think it's worth it for this type of game. If it were a different type of game that was a little bit more hyper realistic in first person, like I'm talking like Rainbow Six Siege or something like that, then I would probably go with a different plan of action. But even then, at that point, this entire thing would probably be done in a different way. So that's kind of like my thought process behind some of the destructible walls and stuff. What will most likely happen is we'll most likely make a third part once I start working on the drug condo and making it so you can run through it and blow open an entire section. Here's how I would go about doing that for those that are kind of curious and want to hear the inside scoop about how I go about making that. Number one, I'd have to change these wood boards or these studs and make it so they're UV. They have probably a second UV that is projected on the side. And for that reason, if I break this stud right here, I want the entire stud to break. That would basically be the idea. My only issue with the studs breaking and masking out the studs is you're not going to see the inside of the stud, which might kind of suck. But what I kind of did with this material, as you can tell, is I actually made it two-sided. I even added normals in here, but I made it two-sided, which from our top-down view kind of looks like it has thickness, like it's thick. And I did a lot of edits to the material. There's a lot of new things in here. So I basically have a whole thing in here that will create new normals. So we're editing the normals in here. And then I also have it so we're using two-sided sign. So the backside of these are going to have like a brown tint to it, which kind of matches the overall inside of the drywall. That's basically what I ended up doing for the destructible walls and how I edited it and added to it and kind of wrapped it up. I thought about maybe editing the glass break brush, but the only problem is this big shatter. I would want this for probably most of our glass, and I feel like if we don't have this for all of the little breaks, it might not look too good. So if anything, we're just going to keep it as one texture. I think it still looks fine, but that is the destruction system. Now, as I mentioned before about how I would go about, you know, making it so you can run through it and actually like dive through the thing if you break it open with like a shotgun or an explosive like a C4 or something of the sort. I would have to dynamically edit the collision of the wall. So I'd have to use some sort of procedural mesh or something of the sort. A dynamic mesh that I can edit and kind of change up some of the collision based on where you broke it. Of course, there's also the caveats of the two-sided studs and all these other stuff. It would definitely look kind of clunky, but it would still sort of work. It wouldn't be the best thing ever, but it wouldn't be the worst thing ever either. If anything, maybe we can make it so the studs are dynamic meshes and the rest of the wall is its own thing, just using the shader, because it works out fine, it looks fine. But the studs might look a little weird with the cutouts not actually having thickness to it and whatnot. So that would be one of the issues, is the collision on its own would be an issue. Then cutting out the studs would be the other challenge. So there's a few challenges with that, and we'll most likely cover that in part 3 when I start working on that drug condo level. I have no idea when I'm going to start working on that. My level designer is currently working on the club, and I am working on the art exhibit. We're going to have another video coming out. I recently uploaded a video kind of going through my process of creating the security area and adjusting the level and my thought process behind that. The next video is going to most likely be me working on the boss room. And I built the lighting in here and it looks like dog shit. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. This looks, oh God. But anyways, we're not here for that. We're not here for building lighting. That is the gist of what I've edited for the wall destruction. To be honest, it might not even be the most optimized way of making the destructible walls. Using render targets could be expensive. I haven't done any profiling for it yet. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of look into it in the future. Most likely what I'll do is when you run really far away from the wall and you don't see it in sight anymore, it'll unload the render target for a little bit and then bring it back once you are back in the space. And maybe I'll just keep the hit locations saved and I'll just, you know, repaint the render target. That way it's not like in memory at all times. So little things like that can optimize this system, but I'll look into that at a later date or when it poses as an issue. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and let me know what you think of the destruction system. Honestly, it's so much fun to just go in here and just break things. You know, I never would have thought that just breaking shit and shooting holes into things would be so much fun. And honestly, I think this would probably be like something we'll try to push in the game even further, is more destruction, because I think that would be super fun. But that is a topic for another day, and I hope you enjoyed. Hope you maybe learned a few things. And this was a bit more of like a, you know, little breakdown, kind of a review of the things that I worked on rather than working on it like the last video. The thing is, with the next level design video, I kind of want to do more of that process of just making things in one video and kind of showing you the breakdown, or not even a breakdown, but like the buildup of features or content rather than just kind of reviewing it. Because I feel like just reviewing it might be a little boring. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Again, like and subscribe. I'll see you later.